Greetings and welcome to the Pransform Podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 3. I'm your host, Christopher Anastasio, and I am excited to announce that we have our guest for today, Marva Sadler, who is the Managing Director at MLSOdyssey. And Marva works with small and mid-sized business owners to navigate high-stakes decisions with confidence. And she's going to talk all about that today and provide you guys with insights, tips, tricks, all that type of stuff, and we're super excited to hear from her today and have her on the show. Marva, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Christopher. I really appreciate it. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So Marva, let's get right to it. I wanted to give you a chance to kind of kick things off, let the audience know about your background, the kind of work that you do with subject matter experts, business owners, people who kind of like fit our audience profile in that regard, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and we can go from there.
Okay, well, my background is probably best described as career ADD. I never saw a challenge that I wasn't just fascinated by, and much more interested in pursuing a new problem than in just doing more of what I have already done. So I've worked across a really wide variety of industries, a lot of different positions, a lot of different company sizes. And in that process, I discovered that I really like small business. I don't really like the politics and the kind of grinding machinery of large organizations. That's just too much energy gets spent in unproductive behaviors, and I'm constantly surprised that big organizations make any money because they make so many foolish decisions. And small businesses can't afford to do that. They go out of business if that happens. And so I like the immediacy and the intimacy of the small business, and I like having the ability to literally reach out and have an impact on the lives of the people that make up the team and see the results and know that my efforts are helping people put food in the mouths of their families and cars in their driveway and helping them have a better life when they figure that out. And so that's how I got into small business. I started out as a strategy consultant with the big strategy firm Bain & Company. And I kind of parlayed that into working for very large organizations, did some really interesting work on a lot of different things because I got tagged really early on as that if there was something we'd never done before or a problem that we didn't know how to tackle, they would give it to me. And I would go and invent some way of talking about this problem and finding a solution for it with the idea that everything has to have a solution. You just have to work at it. And so I would invent these solutions that then became kind of standard practice. One of them was I did a customer-centered culture change for a big organization before customer-centered was a thing or culture change was a thing. And because I'm, like 200 years old. I mean, you should just understand that. And so I've been at this a really long time. And I also, one of my great claims to fame, although, I'm always in the background so nobody ever knows it, is that I helped Time Life Video, which was a division of Time Life Books, discover, and now I'm gonna get his name wrong, but the producer of the Civil War documentary series.
Yes.
They, because of the work that I did to help them to figure out what their strategy needed to be in the area of video, they discovered him, refunded him when he was going bankrupt, and they got the home distribution rights for that series before it ever hit the shelves in any way at all.
Marva, I think you're talking about Ken Burns?
I am talking about Ken Burns.
Okay.
Thank you.
Gotcha. Yes. Very interesting. And I've seen some of that documentary. I think my father watched it front to back. But yes, know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, the president of Time Life Video, after that was over and they'd made a lot of money on it, and it really set them up, he gave me a boxed set of the videos that I still have that I can't use because I don't have a video player, but it's a great memento.
Yes, it's from a different time. That's for sure. No, I appreciate that background, Marv. I think that's an outstanding way for us to kind of set the table here for the audience. Can you talk about some common problems or challenges that you find that your clients face when you do this work with them? And how have those challenges maybe evolved over time as technology has changed, as different tactics have come into the workflow, things of that nature?
Absolutely. So let's start with the common challenges. And they really come down into essentially just, the description of them is, a high stakes decision, which basically means anything you're betting your business on, or anything that is going to be a major change from what you've been doing. So it can be a big marketing change, a big product decision, a new rollout. It typically happens when the company is at a point of inflection where they know they need to do something very differently. So they may have run into operational problems they just can't solve. And, how do we get past those? I've done a number of financial turnarounds where the company's been in such distress that they had very little time left before they were going to run out of money. And some of them, honestly, I've, looked at their books and I've talked to them and I've said, you don't have a way out of this. There is no way that you can get where you need to go in the time frame you have left with the money you have left. You need to sell. And some of those I've been able to help sell and, get their money back. Some I've actually just given them back my fee and said, I can't help you. You need to close this down. You've waited too long. But I also have done a number of really interesting kind of turnaround efforts, not just financial turnarounds, but strategy changes. And the reason that small business is different than big business is because every decision like that, whatever it is, has to involve all elements of the company, because the decision and the actions you take have to be integrated across the entire organization. You have to know what it's going to do to your team. You have to know what it's going to do, what your marketing strategy is going to do to product, or product is going to do to marketing. You have to think about how you implement it and roll it out. And typically you've got a limited amount of time and a limited number of resources, so you have to figure out how you juggle the existing business and what people are currently spending their time on with what they're going to be spending their time on. And that is very different than what happens in a big company. Because in a big company, they come up with a whole new team and they send them off to do it, and those guys kind of think about how it impacts everybody else, but a lot of times it doesn't really hit the other divisions or the other functions until they've run into something that then has an impact on the other function, and they go, oh, and then they spend a lot of money to fix it. You can't do that in a small company. You have to figure that out ahead of time, because if you make the wrong move, you can take the whole company down. And so the risks are very high. The rewards are also pretty high. When the organization succeeds, it's a pretty heady experience.
Yeah, so, it's a good dovetail when you're talking about financial turnaround in particular, with the next question I wanted to ask you, which is, what is your perspective or your thoughts on a business that you might work with in the small, medium space, let's say outsourcing some of their non-core functions, like their bookkeeping, for example, or accounting functions, things like that. Is that something that you ever kind of look at with the business or advise them on or see as a potential strategic
I actually
revenue?
recommend it all the time.
Okay.
Anything that is not a core skill set of theirs, I recommend they go find somebody for whom it is their core skill set, where they can get what is essentially a more highly skilled resource with greater expertise than they can afford if they were to pay for that person full time as a full department. So accounting, marketing, unless marketing is your core skill, customer service, technology almost all the time. So there are really good tech services who will provide you with security and uptime and tech support and everything else, and they'll do it for a fee, and they're very affordable. and what they give you is significantly better than what you can afford to do. And so I recommend it, and it's often part of the strategy, because a small business person often thinks that running a business is easy, and then they find out, no, it's really hard and it's going to drown me. But if you can carve off all the pieces that you don't want to do but that are necessary to operate and that are not part of your core strategy, they just are supporting your strategy, you can get it more effectively and more cost effectively and reduce the mind share that you have to spend on it.
No, it makes perfect sense, Marva. Are there any particular areas that you've witnessed firsthand when you give this advice that are particularly helpful to business to outsource, something that really contributes to the financial turnaround of the company or the better operation of that company? Or are they all similarly effective in terms of the kind of impact they can have on the business if they outsource properly?
It very much depends on the business, because it depends on where their essentially where their constraints are. I am a trained Jonah, theory of constraints Jonah, which means that I look at all business problems and trace them to what is the thing that's getting in your way. That's the constraint. And whatever the constraint is, then determines what your solution needs to be. Because a lot of people will go through and they'll analyze the organization and they'll give general recommendations. Oh, you should always outsource accounting. You should always do this. It's rubbish. What you need to do is you need to create a solution that solves the problem that's in front of you, not problems you don't have. If you've got a perfectly adequate accounting department that is cost effective and they're doing a good job, don't bother fixing that right now, because it's not what's getting in your way. If distribution and fulfillment is what's getting in your way, then let's go look at the options for that. Is a new system necessary? Can you outsource it? What's the cost of outsourcing it? So it really just depends on where you're having problems at this moment. And those problems are going to change over time, because once you've solved one constraint and you've broken open the company and you've got greater productivity and you're making more money, then there will be another constraint, and it's going to be in a completely different place. It might be marketing after that. And you have to then go look at that and say, what am I going to do there? And maybe then it's time to bring in a marketing consultant part-time who can help you figure out how to better spend your advertising dollars, or how to get a better social presence, or how to do a better job of being a TikTok influencer. I personally would never do that, but I will recommend to people, you need to find somebody who can help you do that.
Yep. So Marva, it's a perfect segue to where I want to kind of take things. A lot of our audience comes to us or has worked with us or might work with us on marketing their business, their personal branding, things of that nature. A couple tiers to this question. I guess the first one is, when you mention outsourcing that function, how do you recommend or see businesses balance that outsourcing, let's say bringing in a consultant like you said, and still infusing their marketing with their personal touch, like really putting their face on the business, showing up in the content, for example, and kind of really carrying the flag, if you will, for their business through their marketing? How do you see that kind of balancing out?
Outsourcing is not abdicating. And I think that that's the really important thing. You outsource the execution of the functions that need to be done, and you listen carefully to the expertise of the people who know more about it than you do, who have expertise in how to place Facebook ads, for example, or how to use LinkedIn. But you need to be very clear, and marketing is a really good example of this, what your values are, what your message is, and you work with the marketing outsource people to help them really be able to clarify that with you, but it's still your decision as the founder or owner of the company. You don't want them promising something out here that isn't in fact integral with who you are. And so you always have to keep the messaging and the persona has to be yours, and you have to approve that. Anytime you outsource, you still have the responsibility for the key decision making, and reason for outsourcing is so that you get good trusted advisors who can help make good recommendations, not so that you can just, ignore it and leave it alone.
Gotcha. So sort of as a follow-up to that, Marva, like we notice in our business working with marketing clients or prospecting with them, that it's rare to see anybody doing it really, really well. There's so many platforms to learn, there's so many tactics to keep in mind, there's so much volume to produce. It's almost like there's always some kind of issue that could be addressed or done better, if you will. Do you typically see when you work with these businesses that marketing is at least of some concern to that business in terms of how well they're doing it or how often they're doing it or things of that nature, or it truly is variable where you could have one business that's doing it perfectly and another that is doing it awful, that kind of thing?
Most small businesses don't go into business because they're great marketers. They go into business because they've got a product idea or a service or something that they want to create and they want to deliver. And marketing is a necessary evil for most of them. And quite frankly, marketing has become a significantly more important part of the mix in business than it used to be. And because of the access that small businesses have now to the various channels and marketing opportunities, that mix has shifted a lot for small business, more than, when I was a child or when I was even a young woman. Marketing for small business wasn't really much because most small businesses were pretty local, and that's not the case today. They have to be competitive in a marketing arena. And so that's actually an area that I frequently outsource when I go into a company, and frequently look at, how can we find people who can help us do this better. Even if the founder believes they have a lot of skill in marketing, they undoubtedly do not have skills all the way across the spectrum of all of the different kind of, the marketing content, the SEO management, the ad management, the strategy of how the ads work together, all of those things. They're not going to be experts in all of them. None of us are.
Yeah, that's kind of what I had a sense you might say to that question, just because of our own experience with surveying, potential prospects, how they're doing things, or clients that we work with, how they're executing those types of things. Kind of going back up a level.
I'm going to interrupt you for just a second, because I actually had an experience with that today as I was working with one of my clients. They've been concerned that their current marketing agency has not been doing a good enough job for them. They've been too reactive rather than proactive. And so they went looking for a new firm, and they asked me to review the contract because I had made some recommendations about things they needed to be looking for. And a project manager had sent me the contract, and I went back and said, you really need to look at this, because all these people are offering you for what they're saying is placement of Facebook ads. They're not offering you integration with your content strategy or integration with the podcast or anything else. They're just offering Facebook ads. They're not even offering LinkedIn. So before you sign this contract and sign yourself up for this spending, you really need to think about what you're getting here, because so many small companies don't even know what they don't know. And so it's easy, quite honestly, especially with marketing, for the marketers to kind of wave their hands and say, we know everything. And the poor company, the poor officer of the company might get a little wowed or a little overwhelmed. And so I recommend that people be very careful in making their decisions and really, take a step back and stop and think about it before they make a commitment.
Yeah, I'm really glad you made that point, Marva. That's a super, super point as far as reading the fine print, understanding some of the marketing speak that you're right. It can kind of get rolled together or said a certain way, and it sounds exciting or fancy or whatnot, and people don't know exactly what they're going to get from that. So appreciate you pointing that out. I wanted to kind of go back up a level, sort of closing the loop with how we started, and kind of walk the audience through for a bit. When you get involved with a client. They have one of these high stakes problems that they're facing. Maybe they're about to go bankrupt or they're facing severe challenges with the business. What is your general, like if one of our audience members was like, hey, I'd like Marva to take a look at my business or something like that, how would you kind of walk through your approach? What would your approach look like to start helping out that business? Where would you kind of start and end? I know you talked about constraint and what's the thing holding business back, but can you kind of give us a sense, an overview of what that process looks like?
Yeah, I can. And some of it depends on the business issue. I have a very structured process if they're trying to sell their business. And that is, we look at their historic financials and I do some questionnaires with them around what it is they're trying to accomplish. And then we go through a process that is gather all the data, put together a story, identify potential buyers, contact the buyers, have the conversations, and move on. That's one that's a very structured process. For the things where they maybe are not quite so sure what their biggest problem is, or they have a lot of problems, I typically start with kind of an overview. I look at their financials, I talk to their people, I talk to them about what they're running into. Financials, if you understand how to read them, tell you a lot about what's going on with the company. And then I sit down having had those conversations and I say to the owners, here's what I'm seeing. Here's where I believe that your first effort should take place. And this is the reason why. And then we map out a small project in that area that will attack that problem. Because, John Cotter, who's the father of leading change, he said long time ago, start with something small that has a lot of pain behind it and get people excited. And when you've solved a small problem, but that has a lot of pain, it frees people up to have trust to be able to do more. And so I always start there, and then we move into what are some of the stickier problems. On the other hand, if it's a financial failure and they're 30 or 60 days away from financial collapse, I walk them in and I say, look, it's going to cost you this much to get started with me. I am going to read your financials and then I'm going to sit down and give you a plan, and you have to do exactly what I tell you to do. Don't question me, don't argue with me, and don't waste time. And if you do what I tell you to do, in 30 days we will have you turned around and you will at least not be hemorrhaging money. And in 60 days we'll be in a position where you are making money and you're at least break even and you can pay all your bills. But if you waver from what I tell you to do, I can't guarantee the outcomes because you've waited so long. Now, those are really extreme cases. I have had cases like that. And when they do what I tell them to do, we save them. And when they don't, then it's kind of their own decision.
Gotcha. So that's powerful, and it's another great segue for the next question I was going to ask you, which is, because the answer might be listen to Marva. But is there one or two kind of high-level takeaways that the audience can sort of bring from this episode in terms of, let's say they want to solve some challenges in their business, they're maybe not necessarily ready to enlist your service at this point, or maybe they're just about ready to, but something they can immediately take action on or take some insight from that you would want to leave them with from this episode? Again, if they're small, medium-sized, maybe they're just starting to sense that there's some challenges going on with the business.
I think the most important lesson, and it doesn't really come out from anything we've said so far, but this is the most important lesson, is don't delay. If you are seeing or feeling or sensing that something's going wrong, start to act now and really start digging in, start asking questions. If you have a sense that you've got somebody in your organization who's destroying things, destroying the camaraderie or the morale or not doing a good job, don't sit on it. Don't hope that whatever the problem is, person, process, product, whatever the process is, don't hope that it's going to get better. It won't. I guarantee you, it will not get better if you don't do anything about it. And so the answer is, start now for something that you think might be a big problem in 6 months. As soon as you start to get that feeling that something's gone wrong or something doesn't fit quite right, start to make decisions. So I had a strategy conversation with one of my clients earlier this week, where we were looking at the projections for the year, and they have a particular model that generates a lot of cash, and then they burn cash, and then they generate cash and burn cash. And there was a gap in their plan that was going to leave a bigger than normal gap, which meant that we were going to be a little risky in that area around our cash flow. And it was based on a couple of programs that they were going to run back to back, that if they succeeded, everything would be fine, but if one of them failed, it wasn't going to be so good. And so what I told them was, okay, first of all, we need to really look at what happens if both of them fail at a level that we have been seeing. Both of them perform at a different level than what we're expecting. And what are we going to do about it? Well, we need to start doing it now. So instead of saying, let's wait till we see that we have a problem, if you can anticipate there's going to be a problem, start making the decisions today that will help you avoid the problem. And that would be the biggest lesson that I would say. And then the second lesson might be, and if you have any questions about that, get in contact with me, we'll talk about it.
Gotcha. Perfect. I think that's outstanding advice, Marva. I think, the decision paralysis is probably a common syndrome. I mean, so many small businesses are in some sense almost bound for failure, just if you look at percentages. And my guess, and I'm sure you would attest to this from what you just said, is that in almost every case there's some degree of delaying, holding off, putting off a tough decision, not wanting to maybe face a very difficult juncture in the business's lifespan. So I think that's outstanding advice for our audience. Really, really appreciate that.
I'm going to tell you one more story.
Yeah.
And this is about a company that I worked with last year to help them sell. They got in touch with me. They'd tried to sell, and their sale had fallen through, and they were very disappointed in it. They were ready to retire. So I, set up a project with them, worked with them, and as part of that process, we identified some really lovely things about the company. Really well run in some ways, and a really nice business model, really clean financials. And as we worked through some of these things, the owner got a little bit more re-energized, and he started making changes with his team. And the company grew by like 35% during the year. We're significantly more profitable. They suddenly had all this opportunity that he'd been not paying enough attention to. He'd been tired. And so we got all the way through the sales process. We found a good buyer. The buyer had never bought anybody before, so they gave a really conservative bid. And they were a great fit. It was a great strategic move. But the owner kind of looked at the offer, and he thought about the business, and he said, all I have to do is operate the business the way I'm currently operating it for 4 years, and I'll make more money than if I take the buyout. And he said, and you've now convinced me there's more here that we could do, and we could make a whole lot more money. Let's think about it again. So he turned down the offer. I'm now working with them on how to make additional changes to get their management team ready to take over so that the owners can still retire, and the management team will be more capable of running the company because the owner fell in love with the company again. So many small businesses, they try to get out because they're tired. But if they put the right things in place with their team and with their managers, and they make the right decisions and they don't hide from them, they can fall in love all over again because there's a reason they started that business in the first place. And often, when I ask somebody, why do you want to sell your business? They'll say, well, because I'm tired. And I'll say, what are you going to do when you're done? And they'll go, well, I'm going to go start a new business. And my answer is, so you want to go through all that pain and misery over something you don't know works?
Yeah.
Rather than just fix the things that are going on here. And when I ask them that, they look at me and go, hadn't really thought of it that way.
That is, besides amusing, that is a really good story that you told, I think, about the business owner who fell in love again with it. And sometimes I think, just kind of hearing your experience on this, Marva, it's that outside perspective that can just kind of reorient somebody and bring them back to that point. So that's super important, I think, for our stressed out business owners to hear that. So I really appreciate you pointing that out as well. And I wanted to, it's gone about a half hour here,
Yep.
and we start to wind down. I wanted to give you a chance to, you had a recent kind of big event with a book launch in January, I believe, and I wanted to give you a chance to kind of talk about that a little bit to the audience.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, I have to confess, I only wrote a chapter. It's an anthology on women's leadership called Grit and Tenacity. And my chapter happens to be on page 45, and it's called Leading Through Lifting Others. And the book actually made it to #1 on a couple of different bestsellers lists, including women's leadership and I think international leadership. And I will have my chapter available in electronic format in the next couple of weeks, so that if anybody wants to get in touch with me, drop me a message on LinkedIn, I will, and with their email address, I will send them a copy of the chapter if they just ask me for it.
Awesome. That is outstanding. That is a very generous offer as well. And so hopefully our audience take you up on that. I think that's wonderful. And thank you for pointing that out, Marva. And, I think, I would kind of wind down here and say that, in my personal experience, entrepreneurship, things of that nature, the entrepreneur is kind of the unsung hero, the person who sort of takes the risk, goes out to the front line, tries to make their idea come to life. And the ones who fail are never heard from, right? We see the successful ones, we know who they are. We never really know about the ones who fail. So the work that you do to uplift and turn around some of those situations that would ultimately have led to failure is really, really cool. I mean, just personally speaking. So I wanted to point that out
Thank you.
as well.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure. I enjoyed meeting you. You did a great job with the interview.
Thank you so much, Marvin. So as we wind down, just for the audience sake, can you tell them where they can find you online, digital, that sort of thing?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm probably one of the very few Marva Sadlers in the world, so they'll find me if they'll just look me up as Marva Sadler. I'm also reachable via email at marvasadler@gmail.com. It helps to have been a really early adopter of technology and to have an unusual name.
So it sounds like you were on the waiting list for one of those Gmail accounts in like 2005 or something like that.
I started probably around then, and I just
Yeah.
have kept the same email address, and it's just easy that way.
Yeah, perfect. So once again, thank you, Marva, for joining our podcast. This is episode 3 of season 2. Super excited to have had you. Audience knows where to find you now. And anybody out there who's struggling with their business, maybe thinks that it's time to make that decision, hopefully, contact Marva and let her turn things around for you. So thank you again, Marva. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate being invited.